Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey.
And I'm Reena, and today we have a special guest joining us for the Eternals. This is my buddy, former Sony colleague, and filmmaker, Michael Foster. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hello. Thanks for having me.
I like that it's still light out in California, where you're calling in from.
And warm.
Yes. Thanks for
Well,
reminding
that's
me
just
of
an
that
attack.
as well.
Yeah. I went to
Just-
Florida for a week and it was 60 degrees. For some reason, it followed me from New England.
I think the top news story this week in San Diego is people going to the beach.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
But aside from chatting about the weather and me taking a break from listening to Taylor Swift and crying all weekend, like you do, we're here to talk about the Eternals. We're a little delayed because Mikey was in Disney World, which is a completely amazing and valid reason to delay this podcast. But
Scary and fun to be in Florida.
Bold moves all around. But this movie has generated a lot of, not really controversy, but a lot of conversation. It's a very, very different type of Marvel movie. And I was really interested to know what you guys thought. I mean, Mikey, like, what did you think? You saw it, I think, when you were away.
I saw it at Disney Springs, yeah. And it was the one day where it rained and it monsooned and I almost got swept away. But I enjoyed it a great deal. My top level is it's not the best movie Marvel has made, but it's one of the most interesting movies Marvel has made because it breaks a lot of their formulas. I think the non-linear storytelling is a really good choice to set up the relationships that they have over millennia. And interestingly enough, I think as much as we talk about the negative side of what Zack Snyder kind of did with the DC movies, I still think Man of Steel is a good movie, and I like the way that he told that story in a similar nonlinear way with flashback modern. And I think it's also just a stunning movie visually. Sure, there's some bland settings, but the way that it's shot, where there's a lot of like golden hour, or when they're in the jungle, there's a lot of like deep blue going on, and I find it to be a lot more organic looking of a movie than a lot of stuff that they've put out. So I think there's a lot of good within this movie, even though it's not necessarily like the best like played out story or whatever. So yeah.
What about you, Michael Foster, since you are a director, so you have to think about these things when you're putting together films?
Well, I agree with Mikey. I agree with everything you said. It's funny. I didn't look at it from a director's lens. No pun intended. I just watched the movie and I just like either the movie takes me in or it doesn't. And this one took me in. There were things about it, yeah, that weren't perfect, but overall, I was struck by the tone being different. But that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I don't think it let me down in too many ways. So it's funny. I agree with Mikey that it wasn't the best one, but it's so hard for them now to keep maintaining the Infinity War Endgame expectation and level of that took 20 movies to get there, right? So I feel like ever since Endgame, every movie that's come out has been like, well, it wasn't as good as the other ones. But come on, I mean, was Iron Man 2 as good as Iron Man? Was Thor 2 as good? You know what I mean? So it's like it's in there. It fits. So that was I left the theater very, very, very satisfied and very happy.
I mean, I couldn't stop thinking about it since it was definitely a more character driven versus like lots of action and explosions and buildings and things. And it was really around like the set of characters and their relationships with each other and with humanity itself, which like I absolutely adored. And I felt like the story touched on so many different things, even in like very, very tiny ways. Like there was an anti-war message. There was the whole like how war brings about technological advances that benefit society. There was like, do we interfere? Do we not interfere with like the development of people? There was just like so many. There was getting over your ex. There was like so many different layers of things. There was following orders. There was kind of like a, they had a mission and who was dedicated to that mission and their orders and who was like, I don't feel that this is right. So many layers, but they were very subtle and they didn't hit you over the head with anything.
Yeah, I found it really, like, the way that I tried to convey it when I did a written review for it is that I thought Shang-Chi was I thought it was a very good movie, but I don't think it hit with me because even though there's stuff on screen we haven't seen before, the structure of the movie I've seen before a bunch of times in the MCU especially. So I think the stuff in this just feeling new and feeling fresh, and it made it a little more interesting on the standpoint of just it's new. It's something that Marvel kind of doesn't dip its toe into as much. Like there's obvious comedy in this movie. Like Kumail is phenomenal in this movie, but like it's not as front facing as in another movie. Like it's comedy is usually like up with the action and up with the plot. And here it's, I won't say like on a back burner because it's pretty intense when it is there, but like it's just not necessarily as high a priority as it usually is. And like I like the fact that it's a little imbalanced with those things because they are trying to tell a different kind of story here. It shouldn't feel like the typical Marvel movie when you have as grand of a story. Like the story itself is in scope grand, but pretty small within the movie. Because I think the plot actually doesn't kick in until like the third act. You're just learning about these characters for about an hour and 45 minutes. And so I think that's a really cool way to go about something like this, especially when you're trying to introduce 10 characters. Like that's a lot to shove into a movie. So if they had the plot like up front and had to go with like the typical formula for Marvel, I think it would have hurt it way more than breaking the rules that they've kind of set for themselves with their movies.
I think they did a pretty good job too of establishing everybody's personality like pretty well, like before we, to your point, get into the plot. Like we know that Icarus is like the Superman, like high and mighty, kind of straight laced, definitely not funny, like absolutely not funny. I'm more Team Dane, I have to be honest with you. Like he just wasn't doing it for me. But anyway, I'll go into like twin flame stuff and like get into my astrology shit later. But like we know that Cersei is like the nurturing one, like along with Ajax, like they very much like care for the group, care for humanity. You know, we know that Sprite's having an identity crisis, which is fine, which was very reminiscent of Claudia from Interview with the Vampire, which that just took me back to, you know, what do you do when you're stuck in a child's body forever?
That's also like they handled that fairly well because that could go awry easily.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, we talked about Camille being playing Kingo and being very humorous and, like, bringing that comedic element. I loved his valet. How precious was he? How precious was he? I'm
MVP of the movie.
And he stayed with them the whole time. And then, like, Gilgamesh was definitely the protector, even though Athena was, like, you know, the warrior goddess. Like, I kind of liked that element.
That was my favorite subplot in the movie, was their connection.
And then Druig was definitely like the bad boy, like the kind of asshole who wasn't really an asshole, but was kind of an asshole. But like you saw his
breaking the rules, but the rules he was breaking, he was doing it correctly. Like he was the only one like actually looking at the bigger picture of what was going on.
And I feel like Makari was like the heart of the team in a way. Like they all like looked to her, like she just like almost like she was like their kid sister in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's clear that everybody adored her. Am I missing anybody? Have I covered everybody? Who am I missing? Oh, why am I blanking on his name?
Fastos?
Fastos, yes. And then we have Fastos, who again also funny, but more in a dry sense of the way. But he's the mind.
Well, he was the most human out of like any of the characters.
Which is interesting because I felt like he was the brain, where Cersei and Ajax were like the heart of like the group, like figuring all the stuff out.
Yeah, I think it was just more like
but that's why
the fact that he was a family man. Like he became more every man once they broke up. So yeah.
But that was more of like the awesome contrast we saw with the characters as they grew through the film, right? So he's this brilliant mind, but he probably had the most at stake in terms of like his human side, right? With his family and his son and his husband. And then, you know, like Athena is obviously like the strongest warrior, can make any weapon, but she needs to be protected. She needs to be cared for. There was a lot of duality there that I thought was very interesting. And then Sprite can fuck off because she wants to be treated like an adult but acts like a child. Like, I get you.
her final act twist was a little forced. Not the final thing, but like the going with Icarus thing, like felt not out of nowhere because it was a little set up, but like it was, I don't know. That's one of the things that I think was a little weaker. But yeah.
I definitely saw, like, I know that Chloe Zhao said that Henry Cavill's Superman, Zack Snyder's portrayal of Superman, was the inspiration for Icarus, and that was very apparent. Like, Michael Foster, as a DC fan, how did you feel about that?
I definitely noticed the similarities, but it's funny. I was thinking when Mikey was talking about, you know, the how did you phrase it? Not the last thing that she did, but I felt like, and I'd have to watch it again to see if I'm correct on this, but I felt like her choices had no consequence to the story. And so I have to go back and check because it seemed like her decisions were undone. So yeah, I felt like that was a weak part of her and the third act. So, but as far as Icarus goes, it's so funny. I had just messaged a friend the other day because I watched the animated DC movie Injustice. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet.
I haven't seen it, but I have played the games, so I know the plot very well. And they also have, I don't know if it's Ninja Turtles in it as DLC, so it was, even if I wasn't about to play it, I had to play it.
Okay. Well, in Injustice, Superman fights an evil Superman or a different timeline Superman, and it came down to them throwing punches again. And I texted a friend of mine. I was like, it always comes down lately. The last, from Man of Steel on, it comes down. You have this superpower person, and they have to fight another superpower. And it comes down to punches. And I was like, can't we come up with something different than punching each other at this point? Because this has been in a lot of the DC animated films as well. And so this was just days before I saw Eternals. And I was like, see, he's not punching anybody. He's not. It's like they found a different way for him to fly, for him to maneuver, for him to be in the battle, and for him to do things. Yes, there was a lot of his, I don't know if he calls his heat vision, but whatever it was. But I was like, that's what I kind of saw Superman doing more often. If I was going to think about him with his powers, it would be doing that. And I was so glad he wasn't punching anything, because it just seems weird to have Superman and another superpowered being boxing each other. Bizarre to me.
Unless you're Batman, you have no real powers. Then you can punch things.
Right, that makes sense to me. But when it comes down to like punching, I mean, that was the whole thing in the third act of Man of Steel. They punched each other into buildings. All right, yeah, cool.
And then he murders him. But that's the part that's up for debate on that movie for me. But yeah, there is a lot of that in most superhero movies. And it's, sure. I think that's why it felt refreshing at the end of Doctor Strange to have the bargain thing go on, because it doesn't come down to that. It comes down to something of like cleverness and wit coming into a situation, as opposed to just like shoot, punch, whatever.
Yeah, but you know what? It's funny as I say this about the punching thing, and then I was thinking, well, even Endgame came down to punching, but it's done so much differently than.
Yeah.
It's not boring, right? When Thanos and Captain America are going toe to toe, I mean, even back it up and go to Iron Man, the punching between them actually felt like there was contact that was made that actually would slow the other person down. And I remember gripping my seat in Infinity War thinking, oh my God, they're going to kill Tony Stark right now. Because those punches actually seem to have something behind them, as opposed to just like, I punch you, you punch me, and we'll go into a building and we'll punch each other. Endgame did the same thing. There was a lot of hand-to-hand fighting, but there was weight behind it. And I just felt like, anyways, I'm getting way off topic. I was glad that Eternals didn't follow suit. I'm glad that Icarus wasn't punching another being and with no weight behind it. So
yeah, the funny thing about that too is like, in those instances, the combat is secondary to them trying to distract somebody. Whereas like, I think it plays differently because of that, because it's not just trying to subdue somebody and knock them out. It's trying to hold them off for a little bit while we figure out the situation. So yeah, I see where you're coming from on that.
The punches really came from Makari, and they were so fast you barely saw them. And at that point, like he deserved it. Like it was one part punch and like it was like a punch version of like a bitch slap, because like he really needed to like just cut it out.
Well, I really liked.
Everyone was mad at him at that point. That's a different level. That's a different kind of punch.
I really liked how they handled that, for lack of a better term, again, Speed Force aspect. Because they didn't do the traditional like, here's a different kind of slow motion or whatever that we've seen like 5 different versions of over the last couple of years. Between multiple Quicksilvers, the Flash, multiple versions of the Flash too, but and that's
Smallville.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of the things I wish we got a little more of was Ikari. Because I really like that character. I liked seeing somebody that has to communicate a different way on screen, and like, I'm a cheerleader for having open subtitles on screen at any given time. So anytime natural, organic subtitles show up on screen, I want to like stand up and cheer. So it's just, it was a little bit of a bummer to like, they were there, but not like they're there through the whole movie. It was mostly just in the flashbacks and then the very end of the movie. So I was a little bummed out about that.
I mean, like, to your point too, a lot of what the controversy has been on the internet has been like, pretty much everyone's like represented in this cast. And not only, I mean, it's like, A-list, we have A-listers in this cast. It's like amazing. But it was nice to see everybody on screen, and like, why are only white people aliens? Like, why? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And people were mad that it wasn't like explicitly said that they all look different so they could blend in with humanity and blah blah blah.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is they're not even aliens. They're fucking robots. Like,
which I did not see coming.
Robots can look like anything. Well, yeah,
they're fucking Cylons. They're fracking toasters.
That's a difference between the comics and this movie. Is in the comics they are living beings. But I like the change here because it's easier to I think tell a story in this medium of a character who is essentially immortal but can be killed, like immortal in the way that like they just live forever if they're not living and breathing. Like, you can still make them human and relatable, but I think it's just an easier thing to make sure there's stakes. Because if you say somebody will live forever, that is like flesh and blood, that takes away some of the stakes and the like worry that they may not make it out. So that's actually one of the things I do think is a good choice for this movie. For the sake of, it's, if they were just flesh and blood characters, then they're just immortal, and that's hard to invest heavily in. So.
Well, and it differentiates them from the Celestials too that created them.
Yeah, they are going to have to figure out a way to explain. I mean, they could just say adopted, but like the connection to Thanos and stuff going forward. But
and Ego, like we kind of haven't. It's kind of patchwork right now.
Well, I mean that one's easy since Ego's Celestial, but like Thanos and the cameo in the post-credit scene are brothers. So, yeah. So
wait, Eros and Thanos. Spoiler: Harry Styles, perfect casting choice in my opinion. Absolutely perfect casting choice.
Way to go, Variety, on having the guy that's doing the review for you spoil that on Twitter the night of the premiere. Fantastic.
Oh wow, is that true?
Yep.
That was like the worst kept secret ever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because people came out of the premiere and tweeted it. Yeah, I'm cool with that setup. I don't think it's necessarily the most hype thing in the world as far as who the character is. It's if you're super into Harry Styles, you're going to be excited. Fantastic. But like as far as the character goes, I don't think anyone's like edge of their seat like, "Yes, it's Eros." Fantastic. But also that the CG on Patton Oswalt's character,
that was rough.
A little rough. They I don't know why they did that instead of just putting makeup on somebody and pulling a Gandalf and Frodo and making them a little smaller on screen. But
it's funny that now that you say that, I remember I was distracted by him trying to figure out what was going on there.
It's the design and like animation on it just feels
like the Scorpion King. It's like
not,
CG out of like
not
the Mummy.
Bad, but like Clash of the Titans style, like where it's not as rough as like earlier CG like Scorpion King, but it is rough in that like the height of the 3D phase in like 2008 to 2011, that kind of era rough. But yeah, that was it is what it is. It's if you're super into Harry Styles, you're going to be pumped that he's in the MCU. I think that's what that whole post-credit scene equates to. But yeah.
There was some like people were kind of mad about that, but like because everyone always thinks of Harry Styles as like One Direction, but like he's a great
good
actor.
He's good in Dunkirk. He's not in it a ton, but he's good in Dunkirk.
That's actually how he was. That's why she even thought of him for this role, was from his performance in Dunkirk, not from his One Direction days. That's just how he got his start in a boy band.
Well, then honestly, like we keep talking about this post-credit scene, but like the other post-credit scene is way more hype for me as far as like the character and who they teased for that. Because
I'm trying to remember what it is now.
It's Jon Snow picking up a sword and the sword talking to him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But also there's a voice that basically says like, "Hey, are you ready for that?"
Yes. Who do you think it is?
I know for a fact it's Blade.
Yeah.
It's been confirmed that it's Blade.
Has it?
Yeah.
All right, well, I saw it like opening night, like the very first showing, so like there was very little speculation on the internet.
No, yeah.
I forgot about it clearly.
Yeah, it's Chloe Zhao said in an interview the other day, it is 100% Blade. So that is the first bit of Mahershala Ali that we've gotten.
I knew it sounded familiar.
In my theater, it was absolutely dead quiet. I mean, like no reaction to anything. And then I heard the voice, and I didn't know. I hadn't read any spoilers, so I didn't know where it's going. But I heard the voice. Nobody in the theater reacted, and I slapped my thigh and I went, "Blade!"
Yeah,
there was still no reaction.
Well, he straight up says, "Are you ready to handle that blade?" or something like that. And it's like, okay, that's where they were trying to give it away, but we're still hiding it within the script.
Yeah,
like,
it felt like the audience I saw it with, it sounded like they were thoroughly confused.
Yeah.
So,
Well, legitimately, like for a split second, I was like, "Is that Sam Jackson? That's not Sam Jackson. That sounds too young to be Sam
No.
Jackson." And then it started to kick in, and then I got the confirmation like 3 days later or whatever it was. So, yeah,
Right.
But I was thinking it was the actor that played Kang in
Jonathan
Loki.
Majors.
Yeah, for like a
Yeah.
hot second, I was like, okay, because I know that's gonna come in at some point.
Yeah, I don't think that comes in with Black Knight though. Just because of like where those stories kind of align. I just don't. I don't believe that they'll be kind of coming together in the story until like much later, if they even don't kill off the Black Knight really early. Because we'll
Once
see.
again,
Now it's open.
I was gonna say once again, Jon Snow and Robb Stark are separated. They never get to fight together side by side.
No, but they did get to hug off screen a little bit. So that's great.
Just a little hugging.
Yeah. Yeah, is there anything that's like particularly not great that worked out that way for you?
I have a question for you guys because I think it sounds like you're both well more versed in the comic book part of Marvel as well, and I'm not at all except for Spider-Man and Iron Man. But this was back in the '80s.
Well,
so
one of those is the best one, so that's and it's
right.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. So I was confused about Kingo's nice. I don't want to say his exit, but the fact that he did exit the third act, and I don't, from somebody who's not immersed in the comic book series, I don't know if that plays into it, if there's some connection to it. It just seemed a very, very odd choice to have him disappear, to walk away, and then in the coda to bring him back as if he was part of everything that went down. And
so I don't
said,
recall it being connected to any comic book story. But I think that they were just trying to show, like how Reena was talking about, the different sort of perspectives that people took through the movie. And I think they were just trying to show a conscientious, I can't say the word right now.
Conscientious?
Objector.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Because everybody else seemed pretty definitive in what they wanted to do. So I think that they just, with this many characters, they wanted to show a little bit of like somebody that sees both sides of things and can't say like, I'm going to choose this side over this side, because they're kind of caught in the middle. And I think it didn't work as well as they wanted it to, but I appreciate them trying to show that, because just like you were saying with, you know, how you don't want to just see somebody punch the whole time, it's actually kind of refreshing to see somebody be like, I get what both of you guys are saying, and I see points here and points here, and so I'm stuck in the middle. There's nothing I can do for either of you. So I think it's a good idea in concept. I think it wasn't necessarily executed that well. Because yeah, it seems a little bit weird for him to just be like, I'm gonna dip, but I'll see you like right after this fight. It's fine.
right.
So let me know how this all works out.
Yeah.
I think I might have.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think there's something left out of the edit that probably shows him joining back up with them, explaining it a little bit more of like, because you could just say like, well, Icarus launched himself into the sun and doesn't exist anymore, so there is only one side, so he doesn't have to choose now. But that may be oversimplifying it, because there could be a short scene where they go and re-recruit him after that battle, after that confrontation takes place, and it just wasn't there. So, you know, we'll have to see once there's like some deleted scenes or whatever, if it's explained a little bit better.
I guess I think and maybe it's better they didn't, but I really expected the, you know, Han Solo swooping in episode 4 in the trench. You know, I kind of expected something to bring him back and a woohoo to go with that. But I think I found it weird that he was in the final, scenes as if he was part of the team that saved the world. And I just thought, it might have been better just to leave him out of it and then reintroduce him
later.
Because it felt awkward to me. I wanted one of the characters to say something. I'm like, dude, what are you still doing here? Like, get out of here, right?
It's it's like he quit the band and then like the following tour got back together with the band.
He quit the band right before their hit single came out, or their single came out and became a hit, and then he's coming in signing autographs with the band.
Yeah,
and he's not even in the recording.
Or even if he's like, I don't know how this is gonna go, I choose to stay with the people that like I've met along the way, because like he was very attached to his ballet, he was very attached to the cast of his movies.
He did a little bit. He said that a little bit, but it was in the same kind of moment when he was like, but I also still think Icarus is a little bit right. So they didn't do the best job explaining him away while still like conveying a pretty cool idea for something we normally wouldn't see. Is it the most interesting thing to do in a story when you want to see like a satisfying ending? No. And it causes a little bit of confusion and messiness to come about it, but can't win them all.
I think one of my issues was that I felt like Cersei and Icarus were supposed to be these like soulmates, and
they had no chemistry compared to Jon Snow.
Not compared to Jon Snow, who is wonderful, but also compared to Makari and Druig. Like, hey, what is this?
I honestly
chemistry.
I didn't catch chemistry off of them at all. Like at the end of the movie when they were like, wait, is this a thing? That was me in that moment. I said the exact same thing to myself. I was like, wait, what? Like, because it came out of nowhere. They didn't set that up earlier. So it just happened.
I think that actually just happened from what I was reading with the actors, like organically, like that wasn't supposed to be part of the story, but like every time they were together, there was like just so much chemistry that they just kind of let them roll with it. Mm-hmm. But like they kept hyping up Cersei and Icarus to be like soulmates, but really, if we're gonna get into it, they're twin flames. Like they were lessons to be learned, my friend.
Well, to me, that relationship played as
that was a karmic lesson.
If you have seen The Fountain, it played to that, like an eternal affection for one another that, as the plot reveals itself, relives it again and again and again. So it's almost as if it's like in the programming for the robot aspect of things, that it's just, it's destined to happen. And then when everything splits up and they go their separate ways, it's almost like the beginning of the code breaking. And that's when Cersei starts to open up to, she's always cared for humanity, but that's when she opens her heart as a human character to them, as opposed to just caring about them almost in a godlike, like affectionate god kind of way. But yeah, there's also, that's the thing with this movie, is there's vagueness to how they displayed a lot of this stuff, so I think it's open to interpretation. So I'm implanting a lot of this stuff into this movie because it allows me to, instead of just being like, here's a spoon with every little bit of detail. And that's just, it's another thing that I really like about this movie, is it's telling a pretty straightforward story, but allows you to inject a little bit of your own headcanon into it as well, as opposed to just like, yes, Tony and Cap were mad at each other, so they fought. Like,
more punching.
Yeah.
A lot of punching.
Right.
Punching your way out of it. But also, like, there's the idea that these are like immortal beings, and immortal being problems are different than human problems. And if you're into vampires at all, and any sort of vampire pop culture, you know that the way things play out, it takes a lot longer. Like relationships, problems, things are dragged out. Like everything is not instant because you have eternal life. right? So there was also that like slow burn, because that's what happens when you live forever. Like, you don't deal with things right away.
And I do think that was something that they handled pretty well, is once there is confrontation between certain characters when they're coming back together, they clearly still care about each other, because after you have spent millennia with somebody, you instinctively have a familiarity, and like it doesn't feel unnatural for them to just get back into the swing of things, because one of us, like any of us don't see each other for 3 years. We kind of just almost have done that. And those social graces kind of disappear a little bit, but thousands and thousands and thousands of years together they spent. So what's splitting up for, 500 at that point? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a weekend away. So
I also got the impression that periodically they'd meet up with different ones, or like how Sprite ended up living with Cersei. Like, I feel like even though they were separate as a group, they probably ran into each other like
they still had Friendsgiving. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, Michael Foster, I hadn't seen you forever, and then we just went to Disneyland when Galaxy's Edge opened up, and it was like nothing. It was like, let's just do it.
Totally.
Which, by the way, I got a walk on Rise of the Resistance this time.
Oh, why don't you rub it in?
I didn't have to wait longer than 8 seconds to get onto that ride.
Well, nice.
We got up at the crack of dawn and didn't really have to wait.
Listen, I was also at Walt Disney World the week that ride opened, and I was there at 4 a.m. So, yes.
There you go.
I earned it this time by my previous injuries. But yeah.
Fine.
How was Rise? The new ride?
It is the best ride Disney has.
Nice.
Hands, like, whether it's thrill rides, whether it's dark rides, whatever, it is their best ride altogether. And it's almost 16 minutes long from the moment you get into the first part of the experience.
Would you say it's better than Indiana Jones?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I love Indiana Jones. Like, I think when we went, it was closed, but I've been on it 3 times, and it is a top tier Disneyland ride. Like, they have a version of it in Disney World, but it's themed to the movie Dinosaur.
Oh, okay.
And it's not good. I just rode it for the first time. Comparatively not good. It's fine, but it's comparatively not good. Yeah. Back to the movie. Sidetrack.
No, I mean, I really enjoyed this film. It actually, like, there's all these misleading headlines about how, like, oh my god, it has the lowest score on the cinema score, and it's the lowest rated Marvel movie, blah blah blah.
Still, it was still like a B-, wasn't it?
It's a B. It's like a solid B.
It's a B. Yeah, it's a solid B.
Like, and also, who in their right mind is like rating like Iron Man 2, like, and Thor 2, like, up there? Like, no.
You'd be surprised.
I know.
Yeah, but have you also read the articles too about how there was already people F-bombing it? And I mean by giving it like a low rating on Rotten Tomatoes or wherever, and it always seems to come down to 2 things. And sorry guys, we won't
diversity in women. But diversity in women.
Yes. Every
time.
I mean, it's true. I feel like even if it's not true, the perception is that it's true because it keeps happening. Yeah. And I wasn't a fan of the latest Ghostbusters movie, but I was open to it and I was willing to give it a chance. I wasn't just rapping all over it because it was women, but I saw nothing but that online all the time. It was like nothing but this movie's going to suck because it's all women. Or why can't there be men? You had men last time. And I was so ready to love this movie. Yeah. And then of course it's crap. But
there is an upcoming episode in the same week that this episode comes out where we talk about that very thing.
Yep.
Nice.
We did
so that was a good little teaser for you.
Yeah.
That was nice. Tying it right in.
We have a cram sesh episode where we did Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and then we explained we didn't do 2016 because it's not part of the canon of Afterlife leading into it. Right. But the both of us actually enjoyed that movie a fair amount. We don't think it's the best movie in the world, but we think it's fine. Like, it's a perfectly fine movie.
Not everything needs to be the best movie in the world.
Yeah.
Like, it is an enjoyable movie. I didn't see the plot twist coming. They did some bait and switch with the trailer. I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Like, the conversation with Ajax and Icarus, like, that ended up being a flashback and, like, not a thing. So, like, I like some of the choices they made there. But again, it's like everything can't be Endgame. Like,
well, that's the thing.
Right.
That comes back to what Michael was saying earlier, where it's like, you can't have the expectation of a movie being an all-around masterpiece all the time just because they happen to strike gold a few times after building to it over 10 years. Like, that's an impossible feat that they somehow managed to do. So to put that expectation on every individual movie after that is absurd, especially when it's a much more obscure franchise like Eternals. Like, Jack Kirby is an iconic creator who came up with this concept, and it is a fantastic story in the comics. The average Marvel person does not know this story. And
I didn't know the story.
Granted, the movie story is also different from that in the first place, but most people do not know this section of the Marvel universe. And the same thing happened to Guardians. It just happened that Guardians was a much more like traditionally comedic movie, and it's just a much more mass appeal movie than this is. And that's,
but even Guardians at the time of its release that's what set it apart from the other Marvel movies, because they hadn't established that tone yet. And so that set it apart between the humor, which was very well done in the context of a Marvel film, and the soundtrack, the way the songs played and so on. They hadn't done that yet. And I wonder if that's, going to be looked back on with Eternals in the same way, that this is being a new phase of where they're going. It's a different type of animal. And I wonder if it's going to say something for where they go with this. Right. So, I don't know what my point was anymore.
I think, sorry, I before I forget this, I think my interpretation of what you were just saying is a little bit similar, but like I think this movie is probably going to be the first cult MCU movie. Where I think
this could get a Criterion collection.
Maybe not that far. Although Armageddon is on the Criterion collection, so
that's a funny Criterion viewing.
Yeah, RoboCop also on there.
RoboCop deserves it though.
Well,
I think. Well,
Verhoeven, do it.
Armageddon was a very strange choice, and I remember renting it or borrowing it from somebody to listen to the commentary.
I think it was strictly for the visuals. I think it was one of those. And the animal crackers scene, of course. But the thing with this movie, I think it's going to speak to a smaller range of people who are Marvel fans and non-Marvel fans who just happen to see the movie. And they're going to look at it more as the way that we saw Captain America, the Winter Soldier, as a 70s spy thriller. It's not as intense as a actual 70s spy thriller, but it's that seasoning on top of the Marvel formula. I think this is an attempt at doing a more art house movie seasoned on top of the Marvel formula. And that's just not going to go for everybody. Like, that's not going to hit for a mass audience in the way that other stuff will. So I think that this is, as much as it is funny to say like a cult movie for a Marvel movie, but like, I do think that this is kind of what that is.
Yeah, I mean, and too, if you're into like cinematography, like, it's a beautiful film.
It is.
It also just seems, to your point, like bigger. Like, I don't know, for some reason, just the way that it's shot, like, it's just, everything about it is just different.
Well, seeing this in IMAX was unbelievable. Like, when Ajax first goes up and she's just like tiny on the screen with Celestial taking over like the extended screen real estate of IMAX, it was it was incredible. Like, it's one of the
Not
coolest visuals.
Galactus.
Yes. Non-eater of worlds. But it was just really cool to see that kind of scope. Like, we've seen big scope in terms of the story, but like visually speaking, the scope on that was massive. And it sort of puts light bulbs up of like, okay, what this is kind of what it's going to look like when we finally get Galactus in 10 more years. So like, I'm super pumped about like that kind of future storytelling more than like the Harry Styles stuff. Like, just because knowing the stuff that it's teasing, it just seems cool. Like, I'm ready for that kind of stuff, because I've said this on this show many times. I'm excited for X-Men to come into this. I'm way more excited for Fantastic Four, and that to me sets up Galactus. That sets up these grand things. Granted, X-Men sets up Phoenix if they go for it again, and they could do it right.
Please
for
don't
once.
ruin it. Please no.
Third time's the charm. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and listen, we're getting more 90s X-Men cartoon now. So
yes we are.
But yeah, the stuff that's visually on screen in this plays more like teasing stuff of what's to come for me. That's like just really, really exciting.
And it makes you know going into this as well. At least, I mean, I was aware of it because I'm not familiar with the comic book version of Eternals, but I sat there and thought, okay, well, there's a reason why we're watching this movie. There's a plan that Kevin Feige and the other creatives, you know, they've got on some. I'm sure there's some big board they have. Which characters they need to introduce in order to get to this other place, and it was the same thing with the, you know, phase 2, whether it's introducing Guardians into the story to get to a certain point.
Right.
I was almost going to say to get to an end game. Should have said that. Could you edit that so I say it that way? I'm just kidding. But I think
put off
introducing
sleep.
The Eternals. But Eternals seemed to me like that. I was watching it going, clearly we're being introduced to these characters for something that's grander. And then now that you mention Fantastic Four and X-Men, I don't know if they're going to, I can't imagine they're going to fit into this next phase of things this soon. But it makes you think like, wow, what's the next thing they're going to get confronted with, you know, that's larger than Thanos, because it's going to take all of the Eternals. It's going to take Shang-Chi. It's going to take, you know, everybody that are introducing that's moving into the next phase, the Marvels and so on and so on. So I think that's, so as I'm watching, I was thinking about that. I'm thinking, man, this is like, it's going to be cool to see where they're taking this and where they're going, because they're clearly setting up a lot of stuff, just as they were with the new series and Shang-Chi and so on. It just feels like it's going to be a bigger, grander thing that they're moving towards. Also,
we forget, no one gave a shit about Guardians before Guardians came out. Like, no one was like, oh my god, Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite. Nobody really gave a shit about Iron Man before Iron Man came out. And it's not even you two. But like,
Iron Man was fairly well known comparatively to Guardians.
But it wasn't like, that was like, what are we gonna do? We don't have all the properties. Like, so like, that's what they went with.
I would say it's less that people didn't give a shit about Guardians. It's just that they didn't know about what Guardians was. Whereas like Iron Man, exactly. So like an Iron Man was just like, we only have the B tier, so we have to set up the B tier. We don't have Spider-Man. We don't have the X-Men. So yeah, that's Iron Man did have its staunch fanboys. Don't you worry about that. But there is,
you know, it's.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, finish.
No. I was going to change topics, so you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but even with Iron Man, it was funny because even that, like, I read the comic books, not religiously, but that was one of the 2 comic books that I enjoyed reading at the time growing up, and Iron Man was one of them. And so when they announced Iron Man, I do remember having conversations with friends who were not familiar with Iron Man, and it kind of surprised me that they didn't know Iron Man. So it's kind of cool that, you know, beginning with Iron Man, there was this lowered expectation, not sure what to expect. And then, I mean, I even had friends who were like really baffled at Robert Downey Jr. getting cast. Like, really? And it was like, dude, he's perfect for it.
Yeah, because they didn't know that the version that they were kind of going for was drawn to look like him.
Yes, and the version, the ones that I was reading at the time I was reading, Tony Stark was an alcoholic.
Yep.
Now I knew that I had no expectation they would cover that in the movies. It just didn't seem to have time for it. But at the same time, I'm thinking, but they cast the right guy. They cast the guy, if they're going to even hint a problem with abuse at any level, they got the guy for it. The guy who understands that side of the character. And but anyways, the point being is that I think the expectations are always interesting because they kind of keep hitting us with these lower expectations in terms of the characters they're introducing. Like again, a lot of people I knew didn't know Iron Man. A lot of people didn't know Guardians. Now a lot of people don't know Eternals. That includes me. So it's interesting how they're bringing these all in, and they keep doing that in a really, really interesting way.
Yeah. So real quick, because we're getting close to finishing up. Something we didn't really touch on very much that I think is the best stuff in the movie, and I said it earlier, is the Thena and Gilgamesh stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I almost cried at some of the stuff with these characters because it was really nice to see that kind of dedication. Like we get Marvel dedication in a lot of stuff. We get like, I'm with you till the end of the line, that kind of stuff, which is great and emotional. But basically somebody was facing the end of their life. And Gilgamesh said, I will forego any outside life that I have to take care of Thena. And we will spend our life together, however that looks. And that is a much deeper thing than we get in most Marvel stuff. And then just like sticking with Thena specifically, any time that Angelina Jolie shared a scene with another like individual person was some of the best stuff I've seen put to film in a Marvel movie. Like, it is some of the best work an actor has done in 25 movies to me. And she is able to convey that talent in snippets, in like 2.5-minute scenes. It is unbelievable. And I think that it's unfortunate that it's almost in this movie because there are so many people who I don't think this movie is going to vibe with. Because I think if you're in for this movie, you're going to... She sells it. She sells everything about this movie in those brief little moments. Yeah.
I agree with you. And I agree because I mean, one of the things I loved about her was she wasn't a lead character by any means. She didn't have like a ton of, in terms of screen time, she really was part of an ensemble. And when she did speak, a lot of times I was surprised that she had some of the funnier lines. Yeah. But at the same time, when she wasn't speaking and when she was interacting with these characters, holy crap! I mean, yeah. I mean, I thought I want to go find out through interviews. I haven't done it yet, but I would love to read what she saw in the script. What was said to her. Yeah, this is something I can play and something I want to play because, again, the limited amount of screen time she had compared to the other characters. But the importance of her character, right, at the same time, I thought.
She was the MacGuffin of the movie too. So, and it's, in my head, I'm seeing it as like the people making this movie know that she can add weight to certain scenes. That's obvious, but I think they were also like, we have a character who we need to show as broken but supported, and they, like, the first thing that kind of pops to mind is Girl Interrupted, and like that's where I see that direct line of casting her in this movie to something she's done before, because they do that a lot with Marvel stuff. They'll be like, we've seen you do this, so we just want you to do it here. And it just so happens that she can also bring just the most weight to those scenes on top of knowing she can kind of bring that aspect. So, yeah.
Right.
Reena?
Sorry, my video's being really weird right now, so
Okay.
chill out. But I was
okay.
gonna say it was nice. It was nice to see this character who's like the pinnacle of strength be the caregiver and
Yep.
see a man in that role. Like, I gotta be honest, it's always like the woman who has to give up everything to take care of stuff, and that's we see that all the time, and that's very typical. And you know, and obviously nothing wrong with that, and that is a lot of choice. Be like, no, I got this, and see him cooking, and
yeah, we lost you for a second, yeah. But you are audible, so just yeah, it was
yeah, it's getting a little funky over here. I'm like, yeah. I'm watching it go like up and down, so I don't know.
We're spiking
in the
a
Matrix is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
well, I think
I really like that.
Yeah, I think since we may be breaking up a little bit here, I will say we probably covered, I would say, the majority of things that we were going to cover about this anyway, so we can probably call the episode there.
Michael, it's Christmas tree. It's too much.
I love it.
Discord can't handle it.
Yeah, and plus my lighting is horrible. The sun's going down and everything, so.
It's fine. Cool. Rita, do you want to have me do it since you're breaking up a little bit? I'm going to take that as yes. That will do it for this episode. We liked Eternals. We will be back later this week with a cram sesh episode of Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2. And then we will have an episode for Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I'm pretty excited for. A little less excited after I saw the Ghostbusters account tweet out that they are going to sell Stay Puft Marshmallow Man NFTs. Eat shit. But yeah, so we'll be back with that. And until then, bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
It's frozen on Rena giving a thumbs down.